for coming. Really appreciate everyone who came by. We're just going to be building a basic coding chatbot. What that means is I know you guys have all used ChatGPT or something or the other. And so we're just going to be making a chatbot very similar to that. And we're going to essentially be using like code files to also get us a little bit more coding context and have it actually work on code. So for the coding chatbot, we want to run it locally because we love open source, but we know not all computers are going to be able to run it locally. So if you know that your laptop might be a little too old or might not have enough power, Lightning AI is the tool we were planning on using for those people. If you do think your laptop has enough power, we do recommend that you have Git installed in some shape or form. So if you have a Mac, it already comes pre-installed. But we also recommend you have an IDE. Looks like we have a question.
Yeah, I just want to know what exactly does it mean to run an LLM locally?
Absolutely. So running an LLM locally means you're running the full large language model on your machine. There is no Wi-Fi needed. There's no you're not sending your data anywhere. It's directly running everything on your machine. So it'll be doing a lot of complex mathematical calculations using generally a GPU. You could run it on a CPU. I'll be honest. I think I've run it on a CPU. It takes a little longer, but it is possible. Just depends on your laptop. I think a majority of people here seem to have strong enough laptops, at least in the crowd here it seems like. I think it should be fine. But do make sure that you have an IDE installed. My preference is VS Code. For those of you who are unaware of what VS Code is, it's an open source, well, kind of open source, and basically an integrated development environment where you can basically write and run some code. So yeah, it's pretty cool. If you guys want to go, you'd have to go online and just search up VS Code. Yeah, please come on in. And you can download it from there. If you already have it downloaded, then you guys should be good. Otherwise, if you guys do not, please go to lightning.ai. I'll have a slide for that later at some point. I'll get into that later. But please go to lightning.ai, sign up with your edu email and your phone number in case you think you will not be able to run it on your local machine. We will be using Git. Okay, so here's a little bit of a demo of what the chatbot should look like when we get it up and running. It's just going to be a basic chat interface where you can send in your query and also attach a file, and it should be able to essentially take all of that information and give you an output. You can continuously iterate. I don't have it in this video where I continuously iterated through different questions, but as you see, it does take some time, but ultimately we'll spit out some sort of information on how you can get your query answered. So I'm going to go a little bit over the architecture first of what the chatbot how it basically runs. So essentially we're going to take the query and the file. The query is your prompt, whatever you're sending in as your message to the chatbot. The file is whatever file we uploaded. For example, I think it was like an onstart.sh that I uploaded in the demo. And it would all get sent in through the prompt to the LLM. From there, it gets output on your screen, and we also store it in a history so that we have a chat instead of just a single iteration. So I'm going to go delve a little deeper because there's a lot of information on that picture. So just to go a little deeper into each individual area. So we're going to talk about prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is not what you think. It's not what your daily basis of how you talk to your ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whatever you use as your day-to-day LLM of preference. It's not really where you prompt engineer there. You can, but that's generally not where it should be used. It should be used in the system prompt, which is why I say it should be called system prompt engineering, to be honest. And what system prompt is a prompt that you give before any users talk, before the bot talks, before anything, and it's like it's gospel. It's like what it'll follow to the T. No matter what happens, that's what it'll follow. Doesn't matter how the person responds, it should follow that system prompt. So one of the best things to do in any system prompt is to ensure that you give it a role so that it knows what role it's supposed to follow through. Like most chatbots just have the role of you are an assistant. You're just a basic assistant. So here I made it a little bit, not that much more in depth. I made a very basic system prompt. Honestly, you want a much longer and much more in-depth system prompt that goes a little bit more into like explaining certain key areas that you might want to focus on. But I made a very basic role-based system prompt, which tells it to code analysis assistant, so that's where it focuses all its like processing power or thinking ability into. Then we have the OpenAI SDK. So this is what we're using to actually chat with the LLM. While we will use something else to run the LLM, to actually like talk to the LLM, we're using OpenAI SDK. It is the industry standard. Basically, every other LLM will use this, even though it's developed by OpenAI. Every other LLM provider decided to essentially integrate it into their own system. It's a fancy way to run an API call. For those of you who don't know what an API call is, it's called an application programmer interface. It's just a way that we use code to talk to other code, to be honest. And the SDK is just a Python wrapper around it to make it a little easier to run in Python. And yeah, like I said, I think everything besides Google Gemini will use it. So, you know, you can easily use this to swap out if you want to change the model, if you're using something else from Ollama, or if you want to use a different LLM later. So this one has a lot of text, I'm sorry, but LLMs in Ollama, there's a lot of information here. So LLMs, I think I went over it a little bit earlier. It's a large language model, essentially a glorified next word predictor, for those of you who don't know. Or if you want to think of it a little fancier, it has a little bit of reasoning capabilities in it. But it's, yeah, like I said, the model behind ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Llama, Meta AI, whatever you've used. And then we're using Ollama to run it. It's, I think, the industry standard for running open source models. It's pretty easy to set up. That's why it takes like a few lines of code, and one of them is like literally pulling the model, and the other is hosting, like serving it or hosting it. And yeah, that's basically it. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you tell me the difference between Ollama and the OpenAI SDK you were just talking about?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, so Ollama actually runs the model on your GPU or CPU. It's actually just the way that you can, how's the best way to phrase this? You have your model direct, like, yeah, it's basically actually running the model, whereas OpenAI is sending the information to the model and getting information from the model. So the SDK itself is just to interact with the model, whereas actually running the model is through Ollama. I don't know if I have an exact analogy for this, but I hope that made sense. Okay. And then, so we're going to be using Qwen 2.5 Coder. This is the LLM that we're going to use. The reason being, it's fine-tuned for coding. There are many variations of this model from small to large. We're going to be using a small one so that it can run on every PC here, hopefully. And it's made by Alibaba, which is a Chinese company, but it's a really, so the original Qwen 2.5 model is a multimodal model, and it's actually one of the best open source models out there currently. And the coder variation is just really, really strong for coding. I've heard a lot of rave reviews and tested it myself, and it's pretty good. There are a lot of alternatives, of course. Llama by Meta for open source is one of the most common ones that everyone knows. There are also other variations of Llama that have that are coded for that are fine-tuned for coding as well. And then, of course, there are closed source models like ChatGPT, which is GPT 4.0. You can even use 4 or O1 or O1 Mini, Claude 3.5 Sonnet or Haiku. They just released the API for that, which is kind of cool. But anyways, and then Gemini 1.5 Flash or Pro as well, depending on whichever model you prefer. But for this case, because we want to run it locally, we're going to use Qwen 2.5 Coder because that's what I've found is to be the best and easiest to run. Then we have essentially the history. So the history is what, like I said earlier, is how we're doing chats. So the OpenAI SDK, its basic function that you're calling is a completion function. It's basically you're just sending in a basic prompt and you're getting an answer. So it's a question-answer sort of thing. But what you actually interact with ChatGPT is not a question-answer. You can iterate over it. You can constantly talk to it. You can have it give you some feedback, and then you're like, no, actually, I want you to change this right here. And that I found is more useful many a times. So I made this something where you can actually store the history somewhere, and so that it's easily able to do that. And so there is a way in the SDK where you can just send in the older messages that were already spoken about. And so that's where the history sort of comes into play. And then Gradio. Gradio is how we're hosting everything. The reason being is it's very simple to use, easy to set up. It takes like 30 seconds. It's very few lines of code. There are alternatives like Streamlit, which are also pretty easy to set up, but I think for a chat-based demo, Gradio is probably one of the best. So yeah, that's the UI tool. So again, just going over the architecture just for everyone in case, because there's a lot that I just went through. And I'll also pause right after this if you guys have any questions, but you're taking the query and file, sending it to your prompt, you're combining them together, sending it across using OpenAI's SDK to the model running on Ollama, which is running using Ollama on your machine, the model being Qwen 2.5 coder. The output then goes to Gradio and also into your history, as well as the prompt coming into your history so that you constantly have that. Any questions regarding this? I know it's a lot of information. I hope I didn't go too quickly, or if there's anything you guys are curious about, please speak up. People on Discord are also more than welcome to ask.
I assume Qwen 2.5 is trained on Python data? Fine-tuned?
So it's trained on quite a bit of data. So I know it's trained on Python, Shell, C++, C, Java, JavaScript, TypeScript. I don't know any more past that, but I know it's trained on at least that much. So for those of you who work on full stack or machine learning, it should still be useful. Because I think those are the majority, like the major, ones. I think there's also a little bit of Shell in there as well. But I'm not 100% sure. I think we can look into that, and I can maybe share that with you guys later.
Can you clarify a little bit on the difference between a query and a prompt?
Right. So a query is just. So the reason why I split them up is because the query is actually what you're sending across as your question. And the prompt is, in this specific example, is essentially the full entire query plus the file text. So when you send in your coding file, right, let's say you're using like a .py file, a Python file, you have all this code in there. I'm basically parsing all that code, sending it across in Markdown format. So what that looks like, I can show you in a little bit. But essentially, like in Markdown format, so that if you, because LLMs are quite well versed in Markdown, as there's a lot of text on the internet that's in Markdown. So a lot of its data is trained on Markdown. So Markdown makes a lot of sense. So you're able to say that, hey, this is a Python file. Here's all the code in here. And then here's the query that we have regarding that. And then you pass that along to the LLM. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. So can I just sort of go over the architecture? You can tell me if I understood it correctly.
Yeah.
So then we have a file. Let's say it's a Python file that we're working on. And we have a question about the code that's in that file. Well, right. So tell me if I'm understanding correctly. But we have a file for any language, Python in this case, and we have a question about that, and we call that a query. When we combine those two together, that becomes the prompt, and that's what the language model reads, right?
Yeah, and there is a little bit more that goes into the prompt. I mean, like I said, there's the message history that also is there, technically, as well as like the system prompt that's pre-existing as well. But yeah, essentially.
From the prompt, it uses the SDK to send it to the actual LLM model that we are running, and we happen to be running it using Ollama. And the name of the model specifically within Ollama that we're using is Qwen 2.5, and then the LLM reads the prompt as well as the history, and it spits out the answer to us using the UI via Gradio.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So now, for those of you who are running it on Lightning AI, like I said, I would get to that slide at some point. Here's that slide. It's just, let's set up Lightning AI. For those of you not running it on Lightning AI, open up your IDE of choice and open up your folder or repository that you basically want to clone the repository that's been created into, or wherever you want to code. Open that up on VS Code. Sorry, your IDE of choice. Sorry, I was leaking my own IDE of choice out there.
Just a blank file?
Yeah, just open up your blank folder wherever you want all the code to be.
Okay, and but about repository, we have a blank repository and a blank IDE file right now.
So I'll explain it one more time. So for those of you on Lightning AI, set it up, go to Lightning AI and then click on New Studio right here. That should open up the folder that you need. Then for for IDE people coding directly on their laptop and not using Lightning AI, please open up your IDE of choice and open up the folder in which you would like to code. So for example, if you would like to code on your desktop, you can just open up your desktop folder on the IDE of choice, and we will start from there. And once you guys have gotten that, I'll give you guys about a minute or 30 seconds to get that set up. If Lightning AI people need a little bit more time, let me know. I'll wait. Or even VS Code or IDE people, local coding people. Don't worry, I'm not discriminating on either side. So most of these images will be showing on the from my local IDE because that's how I coded, but it should look the same because I did it on VS Code, and the Lightning AI hosts a VS Code IDE for you, so it should be pretty straightforward. Okay, cool. And then for those of you just joining, I kind of went over the architecture a little bit ago, and now I'm just getting into how to get the Coding Chatbot up and running. So we're either running it locally on your machine if you think it's strong enough and you have Git installed. If not, we're setting up Lightning AI for those of you who do not think that. And for that, it's just going to that website. You're going to need your edu email and your phone number to set it up. It should take a couple minutes to set up. Yeah, the edu email just basically allows you to get instant access. Otherwise, they put you in a wait list, and that takes a couple days, and we're not here for a couple days. Okay, for those of you who are ready, I'm going to move on if that's okay. Go to the repository. There's also this little code button here where you can get the URL, and then you can write git clone and then paste the URL. Whatever is the easiest. For those of you who might be struggling to paste into a terminal window or are unaware of how to do it, you might have to click right-click to paste, because Control-V may not work the best for all of you if you're on a Windows. On Mac, Command-C and Command-V work perfectly fine. It's just because the Control is a hotkey for terminal, and it overrides your normal copy-paste functionality. So for those of you on Lightning AI, as soon as you open up a new studio, we want to try to run this on GPU. So you're going to get this sort of animation. It's going to take a few seconds to load up. But as soon as you do that, there's this area right here in the far right corner. You're going to see that it's right now running on CPU. Just to make it a little bit more efficient and faster, since everyone will get credits on Lightning AI as soon as you sign up and you get them monthly, you don't have to worry about it too much. You can switch over to the GPU, click here for T4. It's more than fast enough to run any of these, and you can just click, I think this button right here, and it'll take a minute or so for you to switch over, and then you're going to want to run the git clone. I'm going to show you how to download Ollama here. So Ollama is the tool, like I mentioned earlier, that we're going to be using to run all the LLMs on your local machine. This is only needed for those running it locally, but here you go. You can see I've gone to ollama.com, click the download link, and once it's downloaded, you should be able to essentially open it up. If you're on a Mac, you can follow along with the steps I've done here, which is just moving it to the applications folder and downloading the command line tools. If not, on Windows, it should be something very similar. This is not necessary. Again, one last time, I want to make it very clear. It's not necessary for those running on Lightning AI, as the curl commands on onstart.sh should work. But for those of you running it locally, this is an essential step. This is for the people who are running it locally. On Lightning AI, you do not have to worry about this. This is only for those running it locally. We want to essentially uncomment a specific thing so that we create a Python virtual environment. And the reason for that is it's just cleaner. That's it. Nothing important. It's not a necessary step by any means, even for the people running it locally. But for those of you running it locally, please open up onstart.sh. You should find that file in your repository. So for those of you who did that, there's these two lines of code right here. If you uncomment them,
uncomment means remove the hashtag.
Yeah, so you can either remove the hashtag, or if you highlight them, you can press Control/ or Command/ if you're on Mac. That should easily uncomment them. It doesn't really matter how you do it, but essentially just adding or removing the hashtags. That creates a comment. Again, like I said, for those of you who are running it locally, this creates a virtual environment. For those of you on Lightning AI, you already have a virtual environment because every studio is their own environment. This just makes sure that you don't download things that are unnecessary in other files and you don't have extra space being used up, and it runs a little quicker. But yeah, essentially, as long as you guys have done this step for the local and Lightning AI completely ignored this step, that's perfect. We're now going to actually be running on start.sh. So for those of you who are running this on locally, you guys should have already gotten the VS Code set up, so you should have uncommented those files, or uncommented those lines and saved it. Now, and for those of you on Lightning AI, you should just be ready to basically run these 3 commands. The first command essentially sends you inside of the cloned repository on the terminal. The second allows you to basically change the modification setting on start.sh. So all shell scripts, or most scripts that are downloaded, actually I should say, do not come with the execute privilege. They generally only come with a read or write privilege. What that means is essentially you have the ability to read or write on that file, but you do not have the ability to actually execute that file. The reason is it's a safety concern. A lot of shell scripts and similar sort of files could be dangerous. Any sort of executable file could be very dangerous for your laptop, so they don't want it to automatically run by anything on your system, not necessarily by you, but even by malicious scripts. I promise this is not anything dangerous. It's a very safe file. All it's doing is essentially, for those of you on Lightning AI, it will download Ollama. For those of you who already have Ollama downloaded locally, it will not. For those of you who, or actually for everyone, it will also pull the actual model. And so the model we're using, like I mentioned, is Qwen 2.5 Coder. And lastly, it will install all requirements for Python, for the Python script to run. So it'll use a pip install, and there's a requirements.txt file that has all of the sort of requirements that we're needing. I think it's just Ollama, OpenAI, and Gradio. And lastly, then we're going to run /on_start.sh. Now what this does is just execute the file so that you can actually run it. So I'll go through it one more time. We're going into the directory that has all the code, so everything that we cloned down. We're going into that directory. We're modifying the executable setting to make sure that the file is runnable, and then we are finally running the file. It will take a few minutes. You should get an output like what's shown on the screen here. And ultimately, when you're done, we will move forward. Now we'll actually be running the actual application. So this is where we showed the demo originally. This is the line that you'll run, Python Gradio app.py. So Gradio app.py actually runs the whole Gradio interface that you'll see. It creates this whole chatbot window and everything. And Python is just how we run it. So for the shell script, which was the .sh, you use /, but for Python, you're running it using Python, so you have to specify Python run this file. So that's why we say Python and then the file name. And then essentially it should come out with this sort of output. You'll see a link on screen. You can theoretically click or, command click or control click on this link, and it should open up. For those of you on Lightning AI, please make sure that you're not running it in a separate terminal window and that you are using the terminal from the VS Code to command click it or control click it, depending on what you're running it on, because it will not open up properly otherwise. So pull up from the terminal window on VS Code, command click it, control click it, and do it. For those of you running it locally, it shouldn't matter. Reason being is, for those of you running it on Lightning AI, when you are control or command clicking it respectively, depending on your Windows or Mac, essentially what you're doing is you're opening up a local host if you're running it on a separate terminal window, and that'll be running it actually on your local machine, and your local machine is not running Ollama. It's only running on the cloud of Lightning AI, so you need to run it on Lightning AI's local host. So that's why if you command click it from within the VS Code instance, it will take you there. I don't know why the terminal doesn't. It does struggle. I would also recommend for those of you running it on Lightning AI to install Gradio. I will go over that right after this. I'll just give you sort of what it should look like first, and we'll go into that. So here's what it should look like. essentially kind of like what I showed you in the demo. It's just going through each one of these. You have your chat history up here. You have where you can add in a chat and also your file, and then a clear button in case you want to clear your chat history. But for those of you who may want to change the model for any sort of reason, the best way to do it is by going to the onStart.sh, and you're going to update the models there. The reasons you may want to update the model, let's say a newer model comes out. For example, there was a new updates to Qwen 2.5 Coder between the actual workshop and the time of release, which is when I'm recording these edits right now. And so if you want to, for example, update the models for any reason, you go to onStart.sh. Sometimes you may want to also just decrease the model size in case your machine's not powerful enough, or increase the model size in case your machine is powerful enough to handle more. So I chose something that was a little easier, but we're going to go with something even lighter weight than what we currently have to show you guys how to do it. So how would we figure out what models to do? We go to Ollama models, and it'll take you to this library right here. So the link is ollama.com/library. And for example, we're looking for coder models, so you can see there are so many coder models that are available. Some are specific to SQL, and then there's others that are a little bit more universal. And like I said, since Qwen 2.5 Coder was literally updated 16 hours ago, we're going to look at some of the new weights that were added. These, from what I've heard, have made Qwen 2.5 Coder much, much better. So currently we are using this version, which is the 7 billion parameter, and that uses 4.7 gigabytes of space. Now let's say we can even go down to the 500 million parameter, and that would only use, like I said, about 531 megabytes of space, which is almost 8 times smaller. So we're going to basically try to use that instead. So we'll go here, replace this part with it, and replace this part with it, save it, and then we'll run it just like we did the other ones. So you have to make sure you still have Ollama running. So as you can see, I have Ollama running here. And what am I going to do now? I'm going to run /onstart.sh, and this should essentially re-download the model. Since I said it's much smaller and only 531 megabytes, this may even download much faster than the older model or the previous model that we were using. And it should be done relatively quickly, and like I said, already done. And then you can go through this just like you were running the other models. Lightning AI, to make sure that it works on here, there is one thing that you will have to do. You will need to make sure to have Gradio installed. So I recommend going to here again to this plus button on the far right corner. Clicking on web apps here, you will see Gradio. You will want to click install. It will take about a minute or so. For me, it was very quick because I've had it installed before. It will take a little longer for it to install in your specific studio every single time. For the first time. After that, it should be very quick. Then, to make things a little quicker so I can show you how it'll run, we're just going to go into here, replace these with the smaller model like I showed earlier. We're going to save this. You don't need to save here because everything is automatically saved. Totally forgot. There are two ways to pull up the terminal. Again, same as VS Code, you can pull it up from here. Or, for example, if I hadn't pulled it up from here, we can go to terminal, click new terminal. You get the same output. We'll go from here, and we will now go into the Coding Chatbot repository. As you can see, we are now in the Coding Chatbot repository. We'll run the .onStart script. It'll pull the model like we've done earlier. I am running this on CPU. I am relatively low on credits, so I am doing that, but if you want things to run a little faster, it was always smarter to go with a GPU version of it. This will take approximately a couple minutes still. Even though it is the smaller model, it will still take a couple minutes to finish up. I think this is because it's actually pulling Ollama from scratch again, so let's let it finish that off. Now it should be pulling the model. A couple seconds. Beautiful. And then we can run the Gradio app again from here. And remember, run it from this terminal. Do not go to this terminal window here. This terminal window will not give you a clickable link that you can use. Otherwise it will open it up locally. So we want to do it like this, and you should get a window which should take a couple seconds, theoretically maybe a couple minutes to sort of open up because I'm on CPU. Okay, sometimes this doesn't work. The alternative is if this for some reason is not functioning, what we can do is we can always click Control C to interrupt the command. We can go to Gradio and we can click New App. We'll go into the Coding Chatbot, we'll click Gradio App, and we'll click Run. Sometimes Lightning AI is a little finicky in how they set things up. So you will see a few errors every once in a while, but now we should hopefully see it come up, and we do, and you can try asking it a message just with a test message to see if everything's working. This will take quite a while. You can watch the time tick up here with me. So for those of you running it on GPU, it will be much quicker. You do not have to worry about all that time delay that we just saw there, but essentially, even with this small model, it only took about 20 seconds on pure CPU usage. So on GPU, it will probably take a second or so. You can run it yourself and test it out. Have fun.